Why should I study anatomy and embryology of the gastrointestinal tract? Why should I bother? Because faults can happen. Embryology is a process of development. It can stop at any point. Here is one. It's called cleft lip or or hair lip. Here is one of the congenital abnormalities. It should fuse, but it stopped. It's called cleft lip. Here is a case of what's called cleft palate. The two edges should meet and fuse. It did not. Stopped before completion. This is a real word. This is a real case. This is cleft lip and palate. You will be seeing people like this. Here's the trachea, here's the esophagus, which did not complete. So when the baby sucks milk, milk will not reach the stomach. But when the baby takes a breath, the stomach will be filled with air. So the baby will vomit and he will have abdominal distension. This is called tracheoesophageal fistula. Here is another variety. The esophagus did not reach the stomach, therefore the baby will vomit, but the chest will be all right. Here is another type where milk goes in, it reaches the stomach, but it will spill over into the lower respiratory system. So the baby will have severe chest infection. Here is real life. Is the esophagus full of barium, entered the stomach, but at the same time it entered the lower respiratory system, and the result is infection. Here's the esophagus with a diverticulum, with a duplication. What is this child suffering from? I can see that the right lung is inflamed, all of it, which is a very serious thing. But the stomach is filled with gas. So the milk is going where? It's going into the lung. And there's no milk in the stomach, and the stomach is filled with air. So that is one type of tracheoesophageal fistula. This is a drawing after people and scientists studied these diseases. Here's the esophagus. The stomach is collapsed, so there is nothing reaching it, but the baby breathes well. Here is a type where the milk gets into the respiratory system with infection. No milk in the stomach. Here is a problem where the esophagus is not connected to the stomach, but the milk spills into the trachea and goes into the respiratory system as well as the stomach, and so on. You see, these drawings, they are not from the imagination of the scientist. People study cases and then draw figures. But we enter science from behind. We study figures and then we go to the real world, which is wrong. What is the problem with this patient? The right lung is pushed aside, and you can see the shadow here. They are parts of the gastrointestinal tract that are in the chest, which is not normal. That means there's an opening in the diaphragm, and the bowel went into the thorax. So we need to study development of the diaphragm because we have such cases. What is the problem in this patient? Here's the shadow of the heart, but there is another shadow on top of it. That is because there's a defect in the diaphragm and the stomach went into the thorax. What's the problem here? The barium went into the esophagus. This is an abnormal type of esophagus. It is dilated because the normal with peristalsis passes barium very quickly, and there is a narrow esophageogastric junction. This is called achalasia, esophageal achalasia. It's a congenital defect. What is the problem of this baby? The abdomen is what? It's distended. You put barium in the esophagus and the stomach is filled and dilated. But look here, very narrow pyloric canal. And very little barium is passing to the duodenum. And this is constricted pyloric canal with hypertrophy of the muscle around it. This is called hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. What is the problem with this patient? Esophagus, stomach, is the pyloric canal, is the duodenum. No more ahead. Barium is not passing to the rest of the duodenum. That is because the duodenum is stenosed or blocked. Duodenal stenosis or blockage. What is this image telling me? It is telling me that here is a normal small intestine, but here is a part which is dilated and almost gangrenous because small intestine twisted on itself. This is called volvulus. Pancreas constricting the duodenum, called annular pancreas. Here's a normal biliary system. Here's a dilatation of the common bile duct, which is not physiological. Here is blockage of hepatic ducts. This is called atresia of the biliary system. So the bilirubin is going to be stuck in the liver and it will spill on the blood. Therefore, the patient will have jaundice. The baby is born with jaundice. You cannot say a baby is born with jaundice. You cannot say this is infection because the baby has just been delivered. So it must be a congenital abnormality. That's why we study embryology of this system. Twisting of the small intestine on itself. Twisting produces constriction of blood vessels. Therefore, the twisted part is going to be gangrenous. What's wrong with this baby? There is a cyst, transparent cyst, and the small intestine is in the cyst because there's a defect in anterior abdominal wall. This is called omphalocele. You will see babies with this congenital abnormality. It is a very severe one. Problem, a defect in the anterior abdominal wall. This is omphalocele. This is simple umbilical hernia. So closure of the abdominal wall is important. receive a patient who has problem with his gastrointestinal tract. You do barium meal, and you see that this is the small intestine, and you see an extension here, which is blind-ended. What happens here is not physiological. Normal physiology is when contents of the small intestine pass in normal physiological direction. If it stays non-movable, then it will create problem. And this is a duplication of part of small intestine. The most common one is the connection between the small intestine and the yolk sac, which can be blind-ended, or it can be connected to the umbilicus with a cyst here called cyst or fistula. Intestinal secretion will come out around the umbilicus. Enterocysts or persistent vitelline fistula. Because diverticulum is the most common congenital abnormality of the intestine. This intestine, and small and large, they go out of the abdominal cavity and then they come back. They should come back in normal fashion. If they rotate the wrong way, then there will be a problem. You see this kid who's just born, you see its abdominal distension. There's a distension here all over the abdomen. When you do barium in his intestine, you can see there's something wrong. There is nothing in the right iliac fossa. And it's mostly in the upper left quadrant. Therefore, the intestine, when it came back into the abdomen, it came back the wrong way. If you follow this intestine, you can see that it's dilated here, it's dilated behind this area of constriction. This is a problem when there is no autonomic, no parasympathetic supply to this segment. This is not a normal large intestine, is it? No, it's not. It's small caliber. It should be larger than this one. This is called Hirschsprung disease. No parasympathetic ganglia in the wall. Here is a small intestine, and here is a duplication of part of the small intestine. If you look at this image of a patient, you can see that there is double bowel. This is double large intestine. The whole large intestine is duplicated. And when you have to remove one of them, do I remove the inner one or the outer one? No, I remove the outer one, because blood vessels come here this way, supply the inner one, and then supply the outer one. If I cut the inner one, then the blood supply will be cut to the outer one. It's called intestinal duplication. What is this image telling me? This image is telling me that, look, this person has no anal opening because of failure of normal embryology of the anal canal to develop. This is called imperforate anus. Now you know that you will be facing the future, and you build your knowledge to face the future. These are only few examples of congenital abnormalities of the gastrointestinal tract. Where do I start and when? استغنيتي يا هانم. الله الغني. What's the starting point? It's at this very early stage of embryology. What is this? This is the embryonic disc, which has three colors: ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm, with two cavities, the amniotic cavity and the yolk sac. استغنيتوا يا باشوات. تجيك يوم تقول لو كنت حاضر. ترى في السلوك الجامعي عيب محاضرة شغالة، يا إما لا تدخل يا إما خليك قاعد. بكرة تروح والسنوات القادمة وخلي واحد منكم يطلع بالمحاضرة. يقولوا الله يرحم أيام زمان. Early couple of weeks, let's see what's going to happen. The amniotic cavity on the dorsal side will get larger. Here the nervous system is developing in the ectoderm, and here's the yolk sac, which is starting to be smaller, and it's lined with endoderm, the yellow. لا ويتمشى على كيفه. Right. Here's what's going to happen. The amniotic cavity is going to get larger and it's going to be folded, because the embryo is a flat piece of paper, and it is going to be folded in two directions, laterally and anteroposteriorly. And you can see as the amniotic cavity is getting larger, the yolk sac is getting what? Smaller and constricted. So you have upper part here and lower part. We are concerned about this area here. Now, as the that's the head, cephalic part, tail, caudal part. As there's a folding at the same time, so we have two types of folding. This space here, if you look at it laterally, it's going to be extending from the head part to the tail part. And here is the yolk sac, and there's a connection between the upper part and the lower part. This connection is going to be lost very much lately. This is the end result. That's the yolk sac, okay, which is getting as incorporated into the embryo. This is the upper part that we were talking about, in which the folding has just pinched it off from the yolk sac and included it into the embryo. This part here. Okay, there will be constriction, and it's going to be part of the embryo suspended in mesoderm. This is going to be the dorsal mesentery. This is going to be the gut tube. The endoderm, the yellow, is going to produce the epithelium and the glands. The red color, the outer coat, is mesoderm, and it is going to form the muscles and the connective tissue and the blood supply to the tube. So it's two foldings result in pinching of the yolk sac. Result is a tube. This tube, which has a lumen because it came from a cavity, it is going to be very soon filled with cells again. it's going to be filled with cells. يعني there's no lumen. And very soon, spaces will appear and the lumen comes back. This is a normal process. There's a lumen, there will be blocking of the lumen, and then there is recanalization, reappearance. This reappearance can go wrong in many ways. It can produce stenosis, it can produce duplication, and it can fail all around, and the result is contents cannot move. This is called atresia. Here is a drawing of an embryo. This is the head, this is the tail, and you can see that this tube here is the GI tract, which has different arrangements. This is going to be the future mouth, and this is going to be the future anal opening. And this is the umbilical cord. Here's the heart. If you look at this place here, which is going to be the future mouth, it's just below the developing brain. And this is a scanning electron microscope where you see the head. This is the developing brain. These are called pharyngeal arches, which is going to develop the mouth and the pharynx. And then this is going to be the heart. This is the liver. This is the upper limb bud. This is the lower limb bud. These are somites, muscles developing here. If we look into this space here, this space here is called the stomodium, or the buccopharyngeal membrane, which is going to break down and form the opening of the mouth. If you look at the tail, the tube is also closed with what is called cloacal membrane. Cloaca is the septic tank of Rome. مجاري روما كلها تروح تصب في جورة كبيرة اسمها cloaca. So the urinary system and the GIT system is at the beginning going to end up in a dilated space called the cloaca. If you look at this sketch, is the developing brain, spinal cord. This is the opening of the mouth. This is the gut tube with a connection to the yolk sac through the umbilicus. This is the end where it is called cloacal membrane. And this is the aorta supplying three arteries: celiac trunk, foregut, superior mesenteric to the middle gut, and inferior mesenteric to hindgut. What is this? This is the diaphragm. Because we have congenital defects of the diaphragm. This is posterior, this is anterior. We have these two openings. They are called pleuroperitoneal canal, because normally the two pleural cavities, right and the left, they are opened to the peritoneal cavity. And then three things come and make the diaphragm. This is called septum transversum anteriorly, and this light color posterior is called pleuroperitoneal folds. And here is the gut tube. The esophagus is short, extends from the pharynx to the stomach, and it is a tube, a GI tube. Out of the esophagus, this tube is going to be separated into two. The anterior one, or the ventral one, is going to be the lower respiratory passage, the trachea, and then the lower respiratory system. And then this connection is going to be constricted, and it should close, and the lower respiratory system is going to be separated from the esophagus, the foregut. If you look at this image, these are the pharyngeal arches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, no fifth. This is going to be sitting here. It's complicated, and we'll be talking about it when we talk about development of head and neck. So this is the process of separation of developing the respiratory diverticulum from the gastrointestinal tube. It is partitioned, the foregut is partitioned by tracheoesophageal septum. Now we come to this structure here. It is caudal to the heart, and the gastrointestinal tube is going to pass behind it. Okay, this is the tube passing behind this thick structure. This is called septum transversum. And here's the heart. Here's the heart. There will be development of a thick structure caudal to the heart. This is called septum transversum because it grows from the dorsal to the ventral, separating the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. Then we have to close these two canals, pleuroperitoneal canal. We have to separate the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. Now what we have now is the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is going to develop from the septum transversum, the pleuroperitoneal folds, and the dorsal mesentery of the esophagus. Because at this moment, our esophagus is stuck to the posterior wall. Does it have a dorsal mesentery before? The answer is yes. Where did it go? It went down and formed part of the diaphragm. Okay? It did not just evaporate. No, it was borrowed, came down and made the pleura of the diaphragm. So we need to close these areas, and it is closed by septum transversum and the pleuroperitoneal membranes. They come posteriorly, meet the septum transversum, and the diaphragm is formed. If they don't meet, we have congenital diaphragmatic space or hole. This is the adult diaphragm. You can see that the anterior part is from septum transversum. The posterior part is from pleuroperitoneal membrane, plus muscles of the thoracic wall. And the pleura of the diaphragm, they come from dorsal esophageal mesentery. Here is the foregut, the upper part of the foregut, which is the esophagus. Now, the lower part of the esophagus, the stomach, and the first part of the duodenum, they pass from, the esophagus passes from the thoracic cavity. To reach the abdominal cavity, it has to pass through this thick structure, which is septum transversum. 99% of the gastrointestinal tube has a dorsal mesentery. Now, these areas, lower esophagus, stomach, and first part of the duodenum, they have dorsal mesentery. But in addition, they have what? Ventral mesentery. Ventral mesentery equals part of septum transversum. Okay? So we will be looking into this area. This is the celiac artery supplying the foregut. Now we concentrate on this area. What is this area? This is the aorta giving the celiac trunk to supply the foregut. Here is the thoracic cavity. The lower part of the esophagus enters septum transversum. What is septum transversum? Septum transversum is this one. I can see that the dorsal part of the tube is going to what? To grow faster than the ventral part. And this is going to create dilatation of this tube. This is going to form a stomach. The stomach has a dorsal mesentery, and it's going to have what? A ventral mesentery because of its passage through septum transversum. I can see also that the first part of the duodenum is sending something, a bud, to form the liver, the gallbladder, and cystic duct. Then the septum transversum ends caudally towards the tail, and this is going to be the end of ventral mesentery. So the ventral mesentery extends from the diaphragm, the upper edge of septum transversum, and ends lower down. Beyond this point, no ventral mesentery. This image is telling me that there is going to be dilatation of the tube, and it is mainly posterior dilatation, and this is going to be greater than the ventral side, and even it grows more, producing the stomach fundus body, and it is going to rotate clockwise 90 degrees. Yani what was posterior now is what? Now is to the left. لو سمحت اتبع، اطلع ورا بالصاحك، اطلع ورا. على ويش قاعد يعني؟ أنا I'm talking rubbish. So part of the tube is going to dilate. In which way? The dorsal part is going to increase in length, result in dilatation, and this dilatation is going to rotate 90 degrees clockwise, producing the stomach. The stomach is not only rotating 90 degrees this way, it is going to rotate 90 degrees along the transverse action. يعني the point of entry of the esophagus, if you go down, you should find the pylorus. But the pylorus has moved to the right. So there is rotation this way and there is rotation that way in two planes. This is showing how the dorsal mesentery is moving clockwise, and when it is doing so, it is, you see the space here? This is to the right of the dorsal mesentery. When the stomach rotates this way, it pinches part of the greater sac and produces the lesser sac. This is the rotation of 90 degrees clockwise. Therefore, the greater curvature, which was dorsal, now becomes to the left. Here's the esophagus, here's the duodenum, pyloric part. It dilates, they are still on the same line. Then when it moves this way, esophagus, pylorus, almost in the same line. If you look here, this is the esophagus, goes this way, the pylorus has moved this way. Same idea. You find in some books that in the dorsal mesentery there will be vacuoles and spaces which are going to help in the formation of the lesser sac. So the vacuoles, this is rotation of the stomach. You see, in the dorsal mesogastrium, the mesoderm will produce the spleen. Spleen is not part of the stomach or not part of the gastrointestinal tract, but comes in the picture because it is in the dorsal mesogastrium. And when the stomach rotates, the spleen moves where? Moves to the left. Now, what happens to the dorsal mesogastrium when the stomach rotates along its transverse axis? The dorsal mesogastrium, okay, when it moves this way, it becomes along the greater curvature and hangs down. So, formation of lesser sac, when in week 4, clefts appear in the dorsal mesogastrium plus rotation of the stomach around the longitudinal axis. Now, let's look here. What I say here, it is in the septum transversum, ventral to the stomach and first part of the duodenum. I can see things are going dorsally and ventrally. What is this image telling me? This is the abdominal aorta, this is dorsal mesentery, and the tube, as it comes from the thorax, passes through the septum transversum. Okay, this is the diaphragm, this is mesoderm of the septum transversum, which is thick. This is the middle gut, and this is the connection to the yolk sac, the vitelline duct. Look what is going to happen here. There's a bud from the lining epithelium going to the dorsal mesentery. And there's another one budding from the ventral side into the septum transversum. Okay. This is the liver bud. This is the dorsal pancreas. If you follow this image, the ventral one will elongate into the septum transversum and divide. This is going to form the liver, this is going to form the gallbladder and the cystic duct. Where is the ventral part of the pancreas? It comes from the liver bud. Okay? It does not come like this one. It comes from the what is going to be the common bile duct, which is part of the liver bud. What happens next is that the epithelium here, before budding, it differentiates. It differentiates into hepatocyte stem cells and epithelial cells forming the ducts. And then it invaginates into the septum transversum. So if we go back a few steps, this is the gut tube because it has a dorsal mesentery plus a ventral mesentery. Therefore, we are in the septum transversum. Septum transversum equals ventral mesentery. Then the dorsal part of the pancreas develops in the dorsal mesentery, and the ventral liver bud grows into the septum transversum. What is going to happen to the dorsal bud in the dorsal mesentery? It's going to form the dorsal part of the pancreas. what is going to happen to the ventral bud going into septum transversum is formation of the liver. This is the last part of this ventral mesentery touching the chest wall, the anterior abdominal wall. This is going to be the falciform ligament. What's next is that the liver bud is going to grow into septum transversum, making hepatocytes only. The septum transversum, which is a mesoderm, is going to add blood vessels of the liver, connective tissue, capsule. And here's the ventral of the pancreas. So this liver is going to get larger. The stomach has rotated, the spleen is becoming to the left. Look, when the liver is getting larger, what is going to happen to the inferior vena cava and the portal vein? First of all, this dorsal mesogastrium is going to be stuck to the posterior abdominal wall. So look what happens here. Okay. If I ask you this is the lesser sac. What is the most lateral part of the lesser sac? It is gastrosplenic fold or ligament. Okay. So the liver is getting larger and larger. It is in the septum transversum, and when it gets larger and larger, it grows into this fold, and then it reaches its adult size and stops. Therefore, there will be a space of the liver which is not covered by peritoneum. And this is the bare area surrounded by coronary ligament. If the liver has got larger and larger, then there will be no bare area. This is development of the pancreas. There's a dorsal bud and there's a ventral bud. Now, as the stomach rotates, the duodenum is pulled from the midline to the right, and it is rotated. So this is what's going to happen. The tail of the pancreas, instead of facing the aorta, is going to go to the left. The ventral bud is going to go to the right and then stuck to the dorsal bud. Okay, bringing with it the common bile duct. Then being stuck to the posterior abdominal wall and sits in a final position. The pancreas was having a mesentery, but because of rotation, okay, it became retroperitoneal later. Therefore, this is called secondary retroperitoneal organ. This is showing the dorsal pancreatic. The ventral is not coming from the wall of the duodenum. It's coming from the liver bud. Then let's come and see this area here. That's distal to the first part of the duodenum. This is called primary intestinal loop, connected to the umbilicus, superior mesenteric artery. This yellow part is called caudal, cephalic, near the head. The orange one is near the tail. What is going to happen? Rotation. Okay, 90 degrees. The yellow was superior, now it is to the right. The orange was inferior, now it's to the left. Next rotation, there will be 180 degrees. So 90 plus 180 is 270. This is the end result. Most important thing is the large intestine is in front of the small intestine, because this is the normal arrangement. Let us see this midgut. Again, here is the duodenum, dorsal bud of the pancreas, liver bud, its primary intestinal loop along the superior mesenteric artery. What's going to happen next is that this loop, the cephalic part, is going to get much longer. It's connected to the yolk sac. The caudal part is going to have a dilatation. This is going to be the cecum. Cecum will develop appendix. It's going to rotate anti-clockwise. You may say this is clockwise because you are looking at it from the other side. Most important thing is that I bring the large bowel in front of the small bowel. The large bowel must be in front of small bowel. Then, why did the intestine went out of the abdominal cavity? It did so because it gets longer, and because the liver gets larger quickly. Why? Because hemopoietic system, blood forming tissue, is going to come and live in the blood, in the liver. When it comes and lives in it, it gets larger quickly. You know that blood is produced in the liver at some stage of development. So the intestine goes out, rotates, and goes in, and rotates again. On the assumption that it went into the abdominal cavity and the abdominal wall was closed, it gets longer, and the large intestine, most of it ascending and descending, is going to be stuck to the posterior abdominal wall. So this is what's going to happen. Okay? And then comes retroperitoneal. Now, if you look laterally, this is the liver, lesser omentum stomach, greater omentum coming to its root, and this is the transverse colon, and this is the mesocolon. Look what is going to happen here. The returning back of the greater omentum is going to be stuck to the mesocolon. Okay? Then this is the lesser sac, and it's extended down to the greater omentum. There will be obliteration of this space. Okay. Now we look at the hind gut. This dilatation here is the cloaca, and this is the cloacal membrane. Now, look at this tissue here. Here is the hind gut. This is the vitelline duct connecting the small intestine to the umbilicus. This is the hind gut. Okay. And this is the cloacal membrane. This tissue, this red tissue, is going to grow and separate the cloaca into a urinary part and digestive part. See, it comes this way and it reaches the cloacal membrane, and there's a depression from outside to the inside called proctodion. This is ectoderm, while the lining here is endoderm. And you know, anorectal junction is a sudden change of epithelium from columnar to stratified squamous. Look what is going to happen here. The septum has separated the hind gut from the urinary passages, and this is the perineum, and the anal canal is going to be a depression here. This is the anorectal septum going in, separating the urinary part from the anal canal part. If you look at this septum here, going this way and separating the urinary from the rectum. Single opening from the cloaca becomes two opening. Unfortunate people, this separation does not happen. Result into congenital abnormalities. Here's the anal canal. This is the hind gut, and this is from the proctodeum. This is endodermal, this is ectodermal, different blood supply and nerve supply. Salivary glands develop from lining of the mouth.